My name is Terry, and at 32 years old, I finally stood up for myself against my family. All my life, I dreamed of perfect family Christmases, but reality was far from that fantasy. My controlling parents and entitled siblings always expected me to do everything while they criticized my efforts. This Christmas Eve, I decided things would be different. I had set boundaries, prepared myself mentally, and was ready to stand firm. I never expected it would end with shattered glass, screaming, and me driving away alone in the snow. Before I share what happened on that Christmas Eve, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If you have ever had to stand up to family pressure, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of people reclaiming their lives. To understand what happened that Christmas Eve, you need to know about my family. We were what neighbors would call an upper-middle-class success story. My father, Harold, was a corporate lawyer who specialized in contract negotiations, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits and radiating authority wherever he went. My mother, Diane, was the quintessential perfectionist homemaker, with a spotless house, elaborate dinner parties, and a seemingly endless capacity to maintain appearances. From the outside, we looked perfect, but behind closed doors, emotional neglect was our family language. My brother Paul was 3 years older than me, and had always been the golden child despite his increasingly irresponsible behavior. He breezed through school on charm rather than effort, dropped out of college twice, and still managed to land a decent job through Dad's connections. Every financial mess he created, every relationship drama he brought home, was met with understanding and support. My sister Grace, 2 years younger than me, chose the path of least resistance. She learned early that siding with our parents meant an easier life. She was the family peacekeeper, which in practice meant convincing everyone else to give in to my parents' demands. She was married with 2 kids and somehow managed to be both a victim of circumstances and my mother's greatest ally. Then there was me, the responsible middle child. I was the one who picked up the slack, who learned to anticipate needs before they were voiced. I was the straight A student who became a pediatric surgeon, through sheer determination and student loans, not family support. My parents took credit for my achievements, while minimizing the work it took to get there. I cannot count how many holidays I have spent in the kitchen while everyone else relaxed. Last Thanksgiving, I prepared a 20-pound turkey, 7 side dishes, and 3 desserts while my family watched football in the living room. When dinner was served, my mother pointed out that the gravy was slightly lumpy, and my brother complained that the white meat was a bit dry. My father simply nodded in agreement while my sister attempted to mediate by saying, "The sweet potato casserole was nice enough." 2 Christmases ago, I spent 8 hours cooking, only to have my mother rearrange all the serving dishes before guests arrived because my presentation lacked elegance. Last Christmas, I was expected to host despite having just finished a 72-hour shift at the hospital. When I suggested ordering food, you would have thought I had proposed canceling the holiday altogether. The resentment had been building for years. I watched my brother receive a down payment for his house as a gift, while I was still paying off my medical school loans without help. I observed my sister receive free childcare from my parents, while I was told I should hire a housekeeper if my place was messy after long hospital shifts. The inequality was striking, but I had been conditioned to accept it. 6 months ago, after a particularly brutal family dinner where I was criticized for missing my niece's dance recital due to an emergency surgery, I finally started therapy. Dr. Melissa Watson was the first person who helped me see the dysfunction clearly. Our weekly sessions became my lifeline as she introduced concepts like boundaries, gaslighting, and family roles. When I first told her about how holiday gatherings typically went, she looked genuinely concerned. She asked, "Terry, do you actually enjoy these family gatherings?" The question stunned me. I had never considered enjoyment as a factor. "I guess I always assumed that is just how family works," I replied. "Family should be a source of support, not constant stress and obligation," she explained gently. "You are allowed to set boundaries around your time and energy." The concept was revolutionary to me. We spent several sessions discussing what healthy boundaries might look like, practicing conversations, and preparing for the inevitable pushback. As Christmas approached, I decided this year would be different. I had recently purchased my first home, a modest 3-bedroom colonial with a beautiful kitchen where I rarely had time to cook. I wanted to host Christmas there, but with clear expectations that everyone would contribute. Dr. Watson helped me draft a group text establishing the potluck concept. "Remember," she said, during our session a week before Christmas, "their reaction to your boundaries is not your responsibility. You are simply asking for reasonable cooperation." I left her office feeling empowered. This Christmas would be different. I would stand my ground. Little did I know just how much that resolution would be tested. 3 weeks before Christmas, I sent out invitations to my family for Christmas Eve dinner at my new house. I was proud of this home, purchased after years of saving while paying down student loans. It represented my independence, a space that was truly mine. I spent weekends I should have used for rest decorating for the holidays, hanging lights along the porch, setting up a 7-foot tree in the living room, and arranging wreaths and candles throughout the house. In my invitation, I clearly outlined my vision for a potluck-style dinner where everyone would contribute. I will provide the ham and the setting, I wrote in our family group chat. Mom and Dad, could you bring appetizers and wine? Grace, would you handle vegetables and a salad? Paul, desserts would be great from you. The responses trickled in slowly. My mother replied first with a thumbs-up emoji but no actual confirmation. My father did not respond at all, which was typical. Grace sent a vague, "We'll try," while Paul responded 3 days later with, "Sure, whatever." I tried to remain optimistic despite the lukewarm responses. I shopped for a premium spiral-cut ham and ingredients for my signature rosemary roasted potatoes, which I decided to make as well since I could not fully trust that everyone would follow through. I spent an entire Saturday cleaning my house top to bottom, knowing my mother would notice even the smallest speck of dust. A week before Christmas Eve, I checked in with everyone about their food assignments. This prompted my mother to call rather than respond in the group chat. "Honey," she began in that tone that always preceded disagreement, "your father and I have been talking. We think it is a bit much to ask everyone to cook when you know I always handle the holiday meals." "Mom, I am just asking everyone to bring one dish," I explained. "I am still doing the main course and hosting. But you know Paul can barely make toast, and Grace has the children to deal with. It just makes more sense for me to cook everything at your place. I will come early to get started." I took a deep breath, recalling Dr. Watson's advice to stay firm but calm. "That defeats the purpose, Mom. I want everyone to contribute, not just shift all the work to a different kitchen. I am not available to cook all day, or help you cook all day." The conversation ended with my mother sighing deeply and saying she would see what she could do, which I knew meant she was ignoring my boundary entirely. 3 days before Christmas Eve, Grace texted to ask if she could bring a store-bought salad kit instead of something homemade because her kids had school events. I agreed, grateful that she was at least planning to bring something. 2 days before Christmas Eve, Paul called to tell me his new girlfriend Vanessa would be joining us, along with her sister who was visiting from out of town. "That is not a problem, is it?" he asked in a way that suggested he knew it created extra work but did not care. I swallowed my irritation and told him it was fine, but reminded him he was still responsible for dessert for everyone. "Yeah, about that," he drawled. "Vanessa is actually gluten intolerant, so can you handle dessert? Maybe something gluten-free?" I felt my boundary crumbling, but tried once more. "Paul, I am already handling the main dish, sides, and now additional guests. Could you maybe pick up a gluten-free option from the bakery on Oak Street?" "I will see what I can do," he replied, which in Paul speak meant he would show up empty-handed. The day before Christmas Eve, I received a text from my mother informing me they would all be arriving at 2 o'clock rather than the 5 o'clock I had specified in the invitation. "We want to have plenty of time together," she wrote, "and I can help you get things ready." I typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on, "I have planned for 5 o'clock dinner. The earlier time does not work with my schedule." This was partially true. I had picked up an extra morning shift at the hospital to allow a colleague with young children to have the morning free. My mother responded with a single fine followed by 3 periods. That evening, as I was preparing the marinade for the ham, Grace called in tears. Her husband Tom had forgotten to pick up the salad ingredients, the store was now closed, and she had nothing to bring. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, and suggested she stop at the grocery store on her way to my house tomorrow. "But all the good stores will be closed, and I need to get the kids ready, and Tom is useless at that. Can you please just handle it? You know I would do the same for you." The irony of that statement was not lost on me, considering Grace had never once hosted a family gathering or taken on the majority of holiday work. Still, I found myself saying, "Fine, I will figure something out," before hanging up. I called Dr. Watson's after-hours line and was grateful when she picked up. "Everyone is backing out of their commitments," I said, my voice trembling with frustration. "Should I just give in? It might be easier." "Easier in the short term," she acknowledged, "but what message does that send about your needs and boundaries? This is a pattern that will continue as long as it works for them." I knew she was right. That night, I sent a final group text. Looking forward to seeing everyone at 5 tomorrow. As a reminder, this is potluck style. If you are unable to bring your assigned dish, please stop and pick up something on the way. I will be preparing the ham, potatoes, and a salad, since Grace can no longer bring one. No one responded. I went to bed with a knot in my stomach, wondering if I was making a mistake by standing my ground. But as I drifted off to sleep, I reminded myself that my needs mattered too, and I deserved cooperation and respect from my family. Christmas Eve morning arrived with a light snowfall that covered my neighborhood in a serene white blanket. Under different circumstances, I would have found it magical. I finished my hospital shift at noon, stopped by the grocery store to pick up last-minute items, and arrived home with just enough time to shower before my family was scheduled to arrive. At exactly 2 o'clock, despite my clear request for 5 o'clock, I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Taking a deep breath, I opened the front door to find my parents, Grace, her husband Tom, and their 2 children standing on my porch. My mother held a single bottle of mid-priced Merlot, the only contribution they had brought. "Merry Christmas!" I greeted them, attempting to start on a positive note. "You are early. We thought you might need help," my mother said, brushing past me into the house. She immediately began examining my decorations with a critical eye. "The wreath is a bit simple, is it not? And these lights are rather minimal." My father patted my shoulder as he entered. "Place looks decent enough, kiddo. Got any beer in the fridge?" Grace shepherded her children in, looking frazzled. "The kids have already had lunch, but they will be hungry again soon. Do you have any snacks for them?" I had barely closed the front door when Paul's car pulled up, with him and 2 women I assumed were Vanessa and her sister. They came empty-handed, not even a token bottle of wine. After awkward introductions, I gave everyone a tour of my home. It was modest compared to my parents' house, but I was proud of it. Each room was met with subtle criticisms. My mother wondered aloud why I had chosen such dark paint colors. My father commented that the guest bedroom would make a nice home office if I ever decided to cut back on hospital hours and do something less demanding. Paul asked how much I had paid and then winced, saying he could have found me something in a better area for that price. Only Vanessa and her sister offered genuine compliments, admiring my Christmas tree and asking about a painting I had purchased from a local artist. I found myself grateful for their presence, a buffer against my family's familiar patterns. The tour eventually led to the kitchen, which was prepared for cooking but not yet in full dinner production mode. The ham was marinating in the refrigerator, and ingredients for sides were organized on the counter. My mother immediately opened the refrigerator, surveying its contents with a frown. "Is this all you have for dinner? Where are the appetizers? The vegetables? What about dessert?" "As I mentioned in my texts, this is a potluck," I reminded her. "I am handling the ham, potatoes, and now a salad since Grace could not bring one. Everyone else was supposed to contribute other dishes." My mother closed the refrigerator door with more force than necessary. "Well, I did not bring anything to cook because you know I cannot work in an unfamiliar kitchen. I thought you would have everything ready, especially since you invited us for 2. "I invited you for 5, I corrected gently. "You decided to come at 2. My father had found a beer somewhere and leaned against the counter. "Terry has always been difficult about holidays," he said to Tom, as though I was not standing right there. "Remember that Thanksgiving when she insisted we all say what we were grateful for and got upset when Paul said beer and football?" Grace laughed nervously. "Dad, that was 10 years ago." "Still," my father continued, "she has always had these ideas about how things should be. Gets it from her mother's side, all these expectations." I stood in the center of my kitchen, surrounded by family, but feeling completely alone. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I had anticipated. I had 2 choices: give in as I always had, or stand firm on my boundary. "I am not cooking for everyone by myself," I stated clearly. I was very specific about this being a potluck, and I have been planning accordingly. The kitchen fell silent. My mother stared at me as though I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. My father took another swig of his beer, eyebrows raised in surprise. Grace looked down at her feet. "What exactly do you expect us to eat then?" my mother finally asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I expect we will eat whatever everyone brought to contribute," I replied, maintaining eye contact with my mother. "As of right now, that appears to be ham, potatoes, salad, and a bottle of wine." My mother's face flushed, her mouth opening and closing several times before words came out. "You cannot be serious. There are 10 people here, including 2 children." My father chuckled, a dismissive sound that suggested he thought I was joking. "Come on, Terry. Stop being dramatic. Your mother and I drove 2 hours to get here, And I specifically asked everyone to bring something so the work would be shared, I countered. I have been working 60-hour weeks at the hospital, bought a new house, and still managed to prepare part of this meal. All I asked was for each of you to handle one dish. Grace stepped forward, always ready to play peacemaker. Terry, I am really sorry about the salad. Maybe we can all pitch in now and make something? While I appreciated her attempt, it was still shifting the work to my shoulders, in my kitchen with my ingredients. Before I could respond, my mother took my elbow and guided me toward the pantry. Let us have a private word, she said, her smile tight as she glanced at Vanessa and her sister who were watching the scene unfold with obvious discomfort. Once partially secluded, my mother dropped the smile. What exactly are you trying to prove here? This is not how our family does holidays, and you know it. That is the problem, Mom. How our family does holidays means I do everything while everyone else relaxes and then criticizes the results. It is not fair, and I am setting a boundary this year. Boundary? She said the word as if it tasted bad. Have you been reading those self-help books again? Or is this coming from that therapist of yours? I felt my resolve strengthen at her dismissive tone. This is coming from me. I am 32 years old, and I am tired of being taken for granted, she sighed dramatically, playing her trump card. After everything your father and I have done for you, we put you through college. I had a partial scholarship, and I took out loans for the rest. I paid for medical school entirely on my own, I reminded her. That is beside the point. Family helps family. And right now, your family needs you to stop this nonsense and start cooking Christmas dinner. No, I said simply. I will not be doing that. Her eyes widened at the clear refusal. It was possibly the first time I had directly denied one of her demands. You would ruin Christmas for everyone out of selfishness? What about Grace's children? Do you want them to go hungry on Christmas Eve? There is a grocery store 10 minutes away that is open until 4. Anyone could go pick up additional food if needed. But I am not going to cook a full meal by myself while everyone else sits around. My mother stormed back to the kitchen, where my father was now regaling everyone with a story about my difficult phase in high school, when I had insisted on applying to colleges out of state against their wishes. She refuses to cook, my mother announced to the room. Apparently Terry has decided that her convenience is more important than family tradition. Paul, who had been relatively quiet until now, rolled his eyes. Seriously, Ter? You invite everyone to your house for Christmas and then pull this? I invited everyone for a potluck, I corrected him, which I stated multiple times. Nobody does potluck for Christmas, he scoffed. That is for office parties and neighborhood block events. Many families share the work of holiday meals, I countered. It is actually very common. Not in our family, my mother interjected. I have always handled the holidays, and now you are at my house, where I set the expectations clearly weeks ago. My father set down his beer with more force than necessary. Enough of this back and forth. Terry, be reasonable. Your mother cannot cook in an unfamiliar kitchen. Paul can barely make toast, and Grace has her hands full with the kids. You are the host. Act like it. I felt my professional calm, the same steadiness that served me in medical emergencies, settling over me. I understand you are disappointed that dinner is not what you expected. I am disappointed too, because my clearly stated boundaries have been ignored, but I will not be taking on the entire burden of this meal. My brother, never one to handle frustration well, stood up from his seat at my kitchen island. This is ridiculous. You have become so selfish since buying this house. It is like you think you are better than us now. This has nothing to do with the house, Paul. This is about respect and sharing responsibilities. Right, he scoffed, because your job is so much more important than what the rest of us do. Poor Terry, the brilliant surgeon, has to cook a meal like a normal person. That is not what I said, I replied, feeling my calm beginning to fray. And this is not about my job. This is about years of uneven expectations. We moved to the dining room, where I had set up drinks earlier that morning, wine glasses arranged neatly beside a pitcher of water with lemon slices. My mother followed, her voice rising with each step. I did not raise you to behave this way, she said, loud enough now that everyone could hear regardless of which room they were in. This selfishness, this disrespect for family. It is not selfish to ask for help, I said, pouring myself a glass of wine with slightly trembling hands. It is not disrespectful to expect cooperation. What you call cooperation, I call shirking your duties as a host, my mother fired back. When I host, I would never dream of demanding guests bring their own food. You did not raise me to expect help, I acknowledged. You raised me to do everything myself while making sure everyone else was comfortable. That is a pattern I am trying to break. My brother had followed us to the dining room, his face growing redder with each exchange. "Oh, please," he spat. "You have always loved playing the martyr. Poor Terry, working so hard while the rest of us just lays around." "That is not fair," I said, feeling the sting of his words. "I have never called myself a martyr. I am just asking for help." "Help?" He laughed bitterly. "You call sending demanding texts about potluck assignments help? Some of us have real problems, Terry. Some of us do not have fancy doctor salaries and perfect little houses. My salary comes after 12 years of education and training, and 80-hour work weeks," I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. "And this house represents 5 years of saving every penny while paying off student loans." "Here we go again!" Paul threw his hands up. "Saint Terry, so hardworking, so responsible. The rest of us must be such disappointments in comparison." "I never said that," I protested. But he was too far gone in his anger to listen. "You did not have to say it. It is written all over your face every time you look at me, at my job, at my relationships. You think you are better than all of us." "That is not true," I said. But my voice was drowned out as my mother joined Paul's side. "You have always thought yourself superior," she agreed. "Always had to do things your own way. Always had to be different." My father stepped into the dining room, adding his voice to the chorus. "This attitude is exactly why holidays are always tense. Terry has to make everything into a statement." I looked around at their angry faces, then at Grace, who was pretending to be occupied with her children, at Tom, who was suddenly very interested in his phone, at Vanessa and her sister, who were exchanging uncomfortable glances. "This is not about me being different or superior," I tried again, my voice calmer than I felt. "This is about sharing responsibilities fairly." My brother's face contorted with a fresh wave of anger. He slammed his palm down on my dining room table with such force that it shook the entire surface. My wine glass, perched near the edge, teetered for a moment before falling to the floor, shattering on the hardwood and splashing red wine across my cream-colored dining room rug. The sound of breaking glass cut through the argument like a blade, leaving a moment of perfect silence in its wake. We all stared at the broken glass and spreading wine stain. For several seconds no one moved. The bright red liquid seeped deeper into the fibers of my new rug, a rug I had saved for and carefully selected to match the dining room I had painted myself over 3 consecutive weekends. Vanessa was the first to react, grabbing a napkin from the table and kneeling down. "Let me help clean this up," she offered quietly. Before she could touch the glass, my mother spoke. "Leave it. This is Terry's home, and apparently we are not supposed to help with anything." I looked at my mother in disbelief, then at my brother, who showed no remorse for his outburst, then at my father, who simply sighed and shook his head as though I was the one behaving unreasonably. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A clarity I had never experienced before washed over me, cool and certain. This would never change. The dynamics, the expectations, the imbalance, all of it was too deeply entrenched to be reformed through discussion or boundary setting. Without a word, I walked to the kitchen, retrieved paper towels and a dustpan, and returned to clean up the mess myself. No one offered to help. My mother watched with arms crossed while my brother had already returned to the living room, loudly complaining to Tom about my dramatic tantrum. As I knelt on the floor, carefully picking up shards of glass, I made my decision. I finished cleaning, stood up, and quietly left the dining room. No one noticed as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. I pulled my weekend bag from the closet, the same one I used for overnight shifts at the hospital. With methodical calm, I packed enough clothes for several days. My toiletries, phone charger, and laptop. I added the novel I had been hoping to read over the holiday and the soft throw blanket that was a gift to myself when I moved in. From downstairs, I could hear the continued arguments. My mother's voice carried the loudest, lamenting to Grace about my behavior. "I just do not know where we went wrong with her," she was saying. "She used to be such a sweet girl before medical school changed her." I slipped my coat from the hook in my bedroom closet and put it on, dropped my house keys and car keys into my pocket, and picked up my bag. Taking a last look around my bedroom, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The arguing paused briefly when I appeared at the bottom of the stairs with my coat and bag. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me with expressions ranging from confusion to irritation. "Where do you think you are going?" my mother demanded. "I am leaving," I said simply. "Leaving?" My father stepped forward. "Do not be ridiculous. This is your house." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "And I do not want to spend Christmas Eve like this, so I am going somewhere else." My mother's expression shifted from anger to disbelief. "You cannot just leave. What about dinner? What about the children? There is food in the refrigerator and pantry, I said. You are all welcome to cook whatever you would like. Or, as I suggested earlier, there is a grocery store 10 minutes away that is still open. You would leave your own family on Christmas Eve? My mother's voice rose to a near shriek. After we drove all this way? You drove to my home after ignoring my clearly stated boundaries, I corrected her. You arrived 3 hours early despite my objection. You brought nothing to contribute to the meal despite my repeated requests. And when I stood firm, Paul had a tantrum that resulted in broken glass that no one but Vanessa offered to help clean up. Paul scoffed from the couch. Of course you are blaming me. I am not blaming anyone, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. I am simply stating what happened and making a choice about how I spend my holiday. I moved toward the door, and my mother stepped into my path. If you walk out that door, Terry, you will regret it, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. This is not how family treats each other. I looked her directly in the eyes. I agree. This is not how family should treat each other. That is exactly why I am leaving. I stepped around her, opened the front door, and walked out into the snowy evening. Behind me, I could hear my mother's voice rising into a scream, calling my name, demanding I come back inside immediately. I closed the door on the sound, muffling it as I walked to my car, placed my bag in the back seat, and got behind the wheel. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw curtains move in the front window, faces appearing to watch me leave. I did not look back again as I drove away. Snow falling gently around my car, Christmas lights blurring through my windshield, and the tears I finally allowed to fall. I drove without a specific destination in mind, following main roads that had been cleared of snow. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and I was conscious of my breathing, making sure to take deep, steady breaths to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. After about 30 minutes of driving, I pulled into the parking lot of a coffee shop to collect my thoughts and figure out where to go. Hotels would be either booked or exorbitantly priced on Christmas Eve. I could call friends, but most were either traveling or with their own families, and I did not want to disrupt anyone else's holiday with my family drama. I pulled out my phone and searched for nearby accommodations. To my surprise, an advertisement for Pine Creek Cabins appeared, promoting last-minute holiday availability. It was about an hour drive further north, near a small lake. On impulse, I called the number listed. A cheerful voice answered, explaining that they had indeed had a cancellation and one cabin was available. It is our smallest unit, just a studio really, but it has a kitchenette, fireplace, and a view of the lake, the woman explained. I will take it, I said without hesitation, providing my credit card information and receiving directions. It felt right, somehow, this unplanned escape into nature. The drive to Pine Creek took me through increasingly rural areas, snow-covered fields giving way to forests of pine and bare, deciduous trees. The main highways were well plowed, but the last few miles required careful navigation on narrower roads. It was fully dark by the time I pulled up to the office, a small log building decorated with twinkling white lights and a wreath on the door. The owner, Barbara, was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a kind smile. She seemed unfazed by a lone woman checking in on Christmas Eve. Sometimes the holidays are best spent in quiet reflection, she said, handing me the key. Cabin 3 has the best view of the sunrise over the lake if you are an early riser. The cabin was small but charming, with a river rock fireplace, a queen bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a tiny kitchen, and a surprisingly spacious bathroom with a claw foot tub. It smelled of pine and cinnamon from a small arrangement of greens on the table. Through the large front window, I could see the dark silhouette of the lake, ice forming around its edges. For the first time in hours, I took a full breath that did not feel constricted by tension. The silence was profound after the chaos of my home. No arguing voices, no accusations, no demands, just the occasional crackle from the fireplace where Barbara had thoughtfully started a fire before my arrival. I unpacked my small bag, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on the small sofa, suddenly aware of how exhausted I felt. My phone, which I had silenced during the drive, showed 27 missed calls and 42 text messages. I was not ready to deal with any of it. Instead, I turned my phone off completely, something I almost never did due to hospital on-call responsibilities, but I had specifically requested this time off, and my colleagues knew not to contact me except in dire emergencies. The simple act of powering down my phone felt symbolic somehow, a disconnection from the chaos, a reclaiming of peace. I made a cup of tea from supplies Barbara had provided, wrapped myself in my throw blanket, and simply sat, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. I must have dozed off because a gentle knock on the door startled me awake. It was Barbara, holding a covered dish. "We always make too much for Christmas Eve," she explained. "My husband and I host a small dinner for the guests who are here over the holiday. I noticed your car when you arrived and did not see you bring in any food, so I thought you might appreciate some dinner." Touched by her kindness, I accepted the plate of ham, roasted vegetables, and scalloped potatoes, along with her invitation to join the gathering in the main cabin if I felt up to it. "No pressure," she assured me. "Some folks come here specifically for solitude." After she left, I sat at the small table by the window and ate the first truly peaceful meal I had experienced in longer than I could remember. The food was simple but delicious, prepared with care rather than obligation. I found myself thinking about the difference between this spontaneous act of generosity from a stranger and the resentful expectations of my own family. Later that evening, feeling restored by food and rest, I decided to take Barbara up on her invitation. The main cabin was a larger version of mine, with a great room centered around a massive stone fireplace. About a dozen people were gathered there, a mix of couples and small family groups, plus a few solo travelers like myself. No one asked why I was alone on Christmas Eve, though I overheard stories from others that suggested I was not the only one escaping difficult family situations. A retired couple from Florida mentioned they alternated holidays between their two children's homes because they could not be in the same room without arguing. A young man about my age shared that he was taking a year of holidays away from family after his coming out had been poorly received. We played board games, shared more food, and sang a few carols, all without the weight of history and expectation that characterized my family gatherings. I was Terry the pediatric surgeon, not Terry the difficult daughter or Terry the reliable one who would handle everything. The conversations were genuine, the connections authentic despite their temporary nature. When I returned to my cabin close to midnight, I felt something I had not experienced during the holidays in years. Peace. Not the artificial peace of suppressing my own needs to keep others happy, but true inner calm. Christmas morning, I woke to sunlight sparkling on the frozen edges of the lake, just as Barbara had promised. I made coffee and sat by the window, savoring the quiet beauty of the winter landscape. Around 9, curiosity finally overcame my reluctance, and I turned my phone back on. The barrage of notifications was overwhelming. 53 missed calls, 78 text messages, and 35 voicemails. Most were from my mother and sister, with a few from my father and brother. I scrolled through the texts, watching the progression from anger to concern to panicked guilt trips. The first messages from my mother were accusatory. "I cannot believe you would embarrass us like this. This childish behavior is unacceptable. Come back immediately and apologize to everyone." As the evening progressed, her tone changed. "Where are you? We are worried. Please just let us know you are safe. The children are asking where Aunt Terry went." By midnight, the messages had become desperate. "Terry, please. We are all worried sick. We went to your bedroom and saw your things missing. Your father has driven around town looking for your car." Grace's messages followed a similar pattern but with less anger and more concern from the beginning. "Mom is furious, but I understand why you left. Just text me that you are okay. I won't tell them where you are." Paul had sent only 3 messages, the first reading simply "Way to ruin Christmas," followed hours later by "Mom is really upset, you should call her," and finally, near midnight, "Hope you're okay." My father, never one for lengthy communication, had sent a single text. "This situation has gone far enough. Call your mother." I was surprised to find a message from Vanessa as well. "I don't have your number, but Paul let me use his phone. I just wanted to say I understand why you left. My family can be the same way. Hope you found some peace tonight." I composed a single text and sent it to my parents, siblings, and Tom. "I am safe and well. I have decided to take some time for myself over the holidays. I will be in touch after New Year. Please respect my need for space." Then I turned my phone to silent, left it on the table, and ran a hot bath in the clawfoot tub. As I soaked, I reflected on how strange it felt to prioritize my own needs, to create boundaries and hold to them despite the emotional fallout. There was guilt, certainly, but also a profound sense of rightness, as though I had finally stepped onto a path that had been waiting for me all along. I extended my stay at Pine Creek through New Year's Day, calling the hospital to request the additional time off, which was granted readily since I had accumulated so many unused vacation days. The week passed in a blend of solitude and casual connection with the other guests. I read my novel by the fire, took long walks around the frozen lake, and joined the communal dinners when I felt social. Barbara and I developed a friendship of sorts, sharing coffee in the main cabin on quiet mornings. "Holidays have a way of magnifying family patterns," she observed one morning. "Sometimes stepping away is the only way to see them clearly." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "Like I abandoned them." "You removed yourself from a situation that was harming you," she corrected gently. "That is self-preservation, not abandonment." Her words stayed with me as I contemplated what would happen when I returned home. I knew things could not go back to the way they had been, nor did I want them to. During my daily walks, I began to formulate a plan for moving forward, for establishing the boundaries I would need to maintain my newfound sense of peace, while still allowing for the possibility of repaired relationships. On New Year's Eve, I sat by the lake with a journal Barbara had given me, writing down my reflections on the past year and my hopes for the one to come. I wrote about my family, not with bitterness but with clarity, acknowledging patterns that had shaped us all. I wrote about my own role in maintaining those patterns, the ways I had enabled the very behaviors that hurt me by never standing firm in my own needs. As fireworks burst over the lake at midnight, provided by a neighboring resort, I felt a sense of release. The old year with its painful patterns was ending. The new one would be different, because I would be different, not hardened or closed off, but clearer, steadier, and unwilling to sacrifice my well-being for the comfort of others. The next morning, January 1st, I packed my bag, said goodbye to Barbara with promises to return, and began the drive back to my home, ready to face whatever awaited me there. When I arrived home on New Year's Day, the house was exactly as I had left it, save for the absence of wine stain on the rug. Someone had cleaned it, though not perfectly, as a faint pink shadow remained. The Christmas tree lights were dark. The ham I had prepared still sat in the refrigerator, untouched but spoiled. It appeared my family had indeed left shortly after I did, unable or unwilling to salvage the holiday without me. I spent that first day back cleaning, removing holiday decorations and reclaiming my space. I turned my phone back on, responded to work emails, and prepared mentally for the conversations I knew were coming. Rather than dreading them, I felt strangely calm, secure in my decision and clear about my boundaries moving forward. The following day, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote separate emails to each family member. These were not angry manifestos or emotional pleas, but clear, direct communications about my experience, my boundaries, and my hopes for our relationship going forward. I was specific about behaviors that were no longer acceptable, expectations that were reasonable, and the consequences if boundaries were crossed again. To my mother, I wrote about the uneven expectations between siblings, the criticism disguised as help, and the disregard for my time and needs. I acknowledged her role in shaping our family culture, while making it clear that I would no longer participate in patterns that diminished me. To my father, I addressed his passive role in family conflicts, his dismissive attitude toward my accomplishments, and his enabling of my brother's entitled behavior. I asked for respect as an adult rather than being treated as the compliant child I once was. To Paul, I was direct about his anger, his entitlement, and his pattern of creating chaos then expecting others to manage the fallout. I made it clear that while I loved him as a brother, I would not tolerate tantrums or disrespect in my home. To Grace, I wrote about the painful position of the family peacekeeper, acknowledging her difficult role while also refusing to continue our pattern where her peacekeeping meant my sacrifice. I expressed hope that we might build a more balanced relationship where we supported each other in setting healthy boundaries. I sent all 4 emails simultaneously, then went for a long walk in the winter sunshine, giving myself space from whatever reactions might follow. When I returned home, the responses had begun to arrive, each characteristic of the sender. My mother's reply was lengthy and defensive, cycling through anger, guilt trips, and finally a reluctant acknowledgement that perhaps things had gotten out of hand. She suggested we meet for lunch to put this unfortunate incident behind us. My father sent 3 sentences expressing surprise at my strong feelings and suggesting I was overreacting to normal family dynamics. He closed with, "We will talk when you have calmed down." Paul had not responded at all, though I later learned from Grace that he had called my parents in a rage after receiving my email, declaring me dead to him in the heat of the moment. Grace's response was the most thoughtful, acknowledging her role in our family patterns, and expressing genuine regret about the Christmas Eve disaster. She asked if we could meet without the others present, a request I readily agreed to. The weeks and months that followed were challenging as new boundaries collided with old expectations. My mother initially attempted to bulldoze past my clearly stated limits, showing up unannounced at my home or calling repeatedly when I did not immediately respond to messages. Each time, I calmly restated my boundary and enforced a consequence, such as ending a visit or call when criticisms began. My father maintained an emotional distance, uncomfortable with direct discussions about family dynamics. He preferred to act as though nothing had happened, an approach that had worked for him for decades. When I refused to play along, he retreated further, communicating primarily through my mother. Paul's anger eventually cooled, replaced by awkward attempts at normal interaction without addressing the Christmas incident or my email. His relationship with Vanessa ended in February, and to my surprise, she reached out to me separately, thanking me for standing up for myself on Christmas Eve. It helped me see some patterns in my own relationship with Paul that I needed to address, she wrote. Grace and I began meeting for coffee every few weeks, conversations that gradually evolved from careful politeness to genuine connection. She was the first to truly hear me, to acknowledge the uneven burdens our family had placed on me, and to recognize her own role in maintaining those patterns. I always envied how strong you seemed, she confessed during one of our meetings. You never seemed bothered by Mom's criticism or Dad's dismissal. I convinced myself you did not mind carrying so much of the family weight. I minded, I told her. I just did not know how to say so without everything falling apart, and then it fell apart anyway, she observed. Yes, I agreed, but maybe it needed to, so something healthier could take its place. Spring brought tentative progress. My mother, realizing her usual tactics no longer worked, began making genuine if awkward efforts to respect my boundaries. We established a weekly phone call on Sunday afternoons, with the understanding that I would end the conversation if it turned to criticism or guilt trips. These calls were initially strained but gradually became more authentic as we both adjusted to our new dynamic. By the time summer arrived, I had established a new tradition of monthly dinners with friends and colleagues, gatherings that brought laughter and connection without the weight of family expectation. I still saw my family, but, on my terms, in settings where boundaries could be maintained. When the holiday season approached again, I made a decision that felt both difficult and necessary. I would not attend or host the traditional family Christmas. Instead, I volunteered to work the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day shifts at the hospital, allowing colleagues with young children to be home for the holiday. I sent gifts to my niece and nephew, called my parents on Christmas morning, and otherwise spent the holiday caring for children who needed my professional skills. It was the most peaceful Christmas I had experienced, ending my shift with a sense of purpose and contentment rather than emotional exhaustion. Later that week, I hosted a small New Year's gathering for friends and the few family members who had shown respect for my boundaries throughout the year. Grace and her children came, as did a cousin from my mother's side who had always been kind. My parents and Paul were not invited, a fact that caused another brief eruption of family drama but one I weathered with newfound strength. In the months and years that followed, some relationships healed, while others remained distanced. My mother eventually acknowledged, during a rare moment of vulnerability, that she had been raised with the same expectations she had placed on me. I never questioned it, she admitted. It was just what women in our family did. My father maintained his emotional distance, unable or unwilling to engage in the deeper conversations that might have bridged our divide. Paul and I established a cordial if distant relationship, connecting primarily at larger family gatherings rather than one-on-one. The most profound changes, however, were within me. Setting and maintaining boundaries rippled through every area of my life, from work to friendships to dating. I became more selective about how I spent my time and energy, saying no to obligations that did not serve my well-being, and yes to experiences that brought genuine joy. My career flourished as I applied the same principles there, delegating appropriately rather than taking on excessive burdens, speaking up in meetings rather than deferring to louder voices. I formed deeper friendships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided giving. I even began dating again after a long hiatus, now able to recognize and avoid potential partners who showed the same disregard for boundaries that my family had displayed. The journey was not linear. There were difficult conversations, tearful nights, and moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But with each challenge, I returned to the clarity I had found in that cabin by the lake, the knowledge that my needs mattered, that boundaries were necessary, and that walking away from toxicity was sometimes the most powerful gift I could give myself. Looking back now, I recognize that Christmas Eve as the breaking point that needed to happen, the moment when patterns so deeply entrenched they seemed immutable finally shattered under their own weight. In walking out my front door that snowy evening, I had walked into a version of myself that had been waiting patiently to emerge, one who understood that true family supports rather than demands, celebrates rather than criticizes, and respects the boundaries that allow each member to thrive. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own well-being, even when it meant disappointing others? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of setting boundaries with family resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about reclaiming your life. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to put themselves first sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to draw a line and stand firmly behind it.